Good morning, Dan and Amy, and cuckoo cuckoo, Mrs. Macron, the wife of the leading vote-getter in the French presidential election, who will go to a runoff against National Front candidate
Tell him the big
Marine
news.
Le Pen. Emmanuel Macron. His wife, Bridget, he met many, many years ago, about
He met her at school.
23 years ago. He was a teenager. She was his drama teacher.
Yeah, he was 15 years old at the time.
When he left schooling, when he left her tutelage to finish his schooling in Paris, he vowed to marry her.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2007, that happened. Brigitte is 24 years older than Macron.
Yeah.
She was married with 3 children, but she left her husband and began a relationship with her former pupil. They married in 2007. They kept it kind of under wraps, didn't talk a lot about it until, of course, his rise to prominence and being the favorite to be the next president of France. So how about that?
Yeah, when he told his parents that he was in love with
he was hot for teacher.
Well, the thing is her daughter, Lauren, was in the same class, so they thought that he was in love with the daughter, and then they found out it was the teacher. They did go to a Catholic school, Dan. That's where all this happened. So, and she also has 7 grandchildren and maybe some great-grandchildren.
Yeah.
She's old. I mean, she's 64 years old. She looks great for her age. She looks like a cross between Carly Simon and Linda Evans. Kind of.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there you go.
But hey, I'm pulling for. Are they going to have any kids, Dan?
I think they've decided against having a family at this point. So here's the thing. Now, on the actual merits of the two candidates, it's kind of interesting because a lot of conservatives looking at Le Pen as the Trump candidate, as the Brexit candidate. But it seems a bit more complicated than that. And there's a couple of good write-ups, both in Wall Street Journal, about the actual proposals of the two, where Macron is much more free market than Le Pen, number one, talking about eliminating thousands of government jobs, talking about reducing the corporate tax rate in France. And number two, in National Review, Tom Rogan has a piece where he distinguishes between Trumpism and Le Penism, if you will. There's neither one are conservatives, but in terms of what we owe to our French allies because of Lafayette's great contribution during the Revolutionary War, it's not so simple to just say Le Pen, populist National Front, that's an extension of the revolt against the ruling class. It's a little bit more complicated than that, particularly since neither one of the quote-unquote ruling class parties has a candidate in the runoff, which is the first time that's happened in the modern era. For more on this topic, as well as some topics on this side of the pond, we're pleased to be joined again by our friend Michael Goodwin. Of course, he is a New York Post columnist and Fox News contributor. Michael, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning, guys. Thank you.
So just kind of the implications of the French election. Trump has been relatively quiet on the topic. But I wonder if you hear any emanations from the White House about the importance of the outcome of the election on May 7th.
Well, look, I think it is an extremely important outcome, particularly when you look at Le Pen's positions vis-a-vis the European Union and even NATO.
Yeah.
She has called for France to withdraw from both. Now, I think the NATO is the lesser of the two, frankly, in the short run, because that I think is something the French would not give up across the board. But the European Union, I think, is really the crux of the issue here. What this comes down to is pro-European Union or anti-European Union. I mean, I think you can slice the electorate, you can look at the various positions. But fundamentally, that is the great divide in the French electorate right now. And it is noteworthy, as you said, that neither of the major parties made it to the runoff. So you really have two outsiders, and Macron's personal life is certainly food for gossip. In this country, it would be a bigger issue. Those French, I mean, Francois
Melania and
President
Trump
had a curious personal life of his own. the socialist president now. But look, I think that this is where I do believe that Le Pen does represent the Brexit Trump impulse, which is that she's more of a nationalist than a globalist, and the focus on the European Union is a very big deal. If France were to vote her in, and if she were to be serious about withdrawing from the European Union, that would and pull it off, that would be the end of the European Union. I mean, France and Germany are the heart of it. It can survive almost any other defection except either one of those two. And so I think that is why you see everybody of the establishment rallying around Macron, is that that is the key litmus test for them. But look, I mean, I have no way of predicting what's going to happen in the May final round, but I think that this is already advancing this issue to make it this far, albeit with something like 23% of the vote, which they each got. This is a remarkable event in French political history.
Yeah.
And it is a remarkable event in Europe's history that this great conglomeration, which was supposed to be the future of Europe, first the Brits won out, and now the French, a sizable French part of the electorate, wants out. So something is changing dramatically in these countries. And look, I compare it to what Trump was able to do in this country and Brexit. I think what they do share, what these three nations share, is that the establishment is so arrogant and so tone deaf to what is going on, why people are so angry at it. They don't negotiate with it. They don't compromise. They just demonize. And what we saw in France is the same thing we saw in Great Britain, the same thing we saw in America, which is, if you don't agree with me, you're a racist, you're a bigot, you're stupid, you're an Islamophobe. I mean, Le Pen is getting the same treatment that Trump got and that the Brexit supporters got. That's where I think the fundamental issue lies. Deal with the people who are dissenting. Don't demonize them. But that seems to be beyond the ability of the European Union masters.
And over the weekend, I saw an interview with Le Pen, and she's embracing the Trump endorsement tweet that he tweeted out. But do you think she's taking it one step too far? I know immigration's important, especially because of the number of attacks that they've had. But I read that she wants to shut down mosques.
Right. Look, I think that that's why I said in my column, she's far more incendiary than Trump. And all of the comparisons do not stand up. I mean, they are not the same person. They do not have the same program. But France, as you say, Amy, really does have a much more serious terrorism problem than we do right now. I mean, it is. I mean, again, the attack last week on the police officers, the guy who was killed in the attack, the attacker, was a known extremist. That the police had investigated him over reports that he was planning an attack on the police just 2 months before he actually carried one out. We hear that every time there's an attack, that these people were on the radar. So, and don't forget, France has had effectively emergency law, under since November of 15. It's almost like not quite a military law, but emergency measures that allow the police a lot more freedom, and yet they still cannot stop these attacks. So I think this is a really serious issue. She's also called for the end of all immigration. So these are draconian moves that I think will probably hurt her in the final election. But I think for now, what she has pulled off is an amazing testament to the mood in France.
And to be clear, Priebus said on Meet the Press yesterday, in no way is Trump endorsing Le Pen. Trump tweeted out yesterday, there's a very interesting election going on in France, so let's not align them too closely. I wanted to get your take on Trump, though. There's an interesting piece in the Washington Post over the weekend about Trump's obsession with cable television. And the idea among detractors of Trump, and I know you have a very good relationship with him, and you've gotten a lot of exclusive information from Trump and the administration, but the idea that Trump sometimes is focused on great ratings And great ratings sometimes translate into good public policy, and great ratings can also not translate into good public policy. And his detractors suggesting that you're getting a little bit of both because he follows what's great on TV rather than what is uniformly great for the country. Is that a fair criticism?
I haven't read the piece, but the way you described it, I would say yes. I mean, a train wreck would make great TV.
Right, right.
But it wouldn't be good for the people involved. So look, I don't know how much TV the president watches. I know he does watch a lot. He seems to respond to a lot of what he watches, whether that's hours a day or just minutes at key times. I have no way of knowing whether people flag things for him and tape it. It's impossible to know, really. But look, I do think that one of the things that must be said about the 100 days measurement, which I do believe it is valid up to a point, that it is traditional, and he is president, so he can be held to that standard as well. I think one of the things that is not being talked about is that there is now there is a disappearance or diminishing of this talk of Russia collusion. There's no longer, other than Maxine Waters, to my knowledge, anybody in Congress talking about impeachment. And I think there is a grudging acceptance that Donald Trump is president and that the election stands. It's not going to be overturned, and that the Democrats are going to have to negotiate with him, and they're going to have to use Congress as a way to get what they can, because he intends to be president. He intends to use the office of the president to further his campaign promises. And so this has now entered a new phase. Yes, he has not swept the field. He has not gotten big legislation through Congress, but neither have they succeeded in turning him out of office. So we've entered this new phase now, which I think is going to be better for the country now that we've all settled into something of a normal status quo.
He is Michael Goodwin, New York Post columnist and Fox News contributor. Michael, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you both.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.